C.2. Part 1 of CQ1, 2 questions. Module 1, Part A and Part B, question number 2 and number 6. Yeah. The first one, this question is pretty simple, but I just want to explain the background a little more. When we develop a Java web application, can we use multiple MVC frameworks in it simultaneously? The answer is yes. Why? All right, so here, the background. First, for Java web application, we all use the Java EE platform. Java Enterprise Edition, that is, we call the platform. Platform, so it provides, so the foundation of basic Java technologies, Java EE platform. Then, because this platform provides the capability to allow other new technologies to plug in, into this platform. All right. So each technology, so usually, we refer to as the framework. So each framework, corresponds to one particular technology, is plugged into the Java EE platform through some special interfaces. All right. So now, when you develop your Java web application, you're allowed to use multiple frameworks, because they are all plugged into the same platform. They adopt the same underlying fundamental features. So those different frameworks, they can communicate easily. Right? And they use the same interfaces to do the communication. So you don't worry about, how different frameworks work together in the Java EE platform. So that's the one part of it. Another part, if we get into the more detail, specifics, how do they work together? So in our Spring MVC framework, we use a special concept called from controller. From controller concept. That's basically a special servlet. Servlet. Special servlet. Dispatcher servlet, right? Dispatcher servlet, from controller. So that is, we call the gateway of the framework. In order to get access into the Spring MVC framework, we need to start with Spring's front controller. And specifically, we use some special URL pattern to identify that particular framework. So let's say URL 1. So for Spring MVC, we use URL 1 for its front controller. Then suppose we have another framework. Let's call it, struts. structs. Yeah. This one, it has its own front controller. So its front controller we use URL2. So we configure URL2. Yeah. So if we want to use multiple MVC frameworks in one application, so usually it's rare, right? Yeah, it is not common. So usually people just use one framework. So when you use one, then you just use that general slash for its front controller. Okay? Any URL mappings under this web application, you have to go through Spring MVC framework. Yeah. But if you have some good reason, you need to use more than one MVC frameworks, you can do that with different URLs. Okay, yeah. All right, so that is the first question. The second one, number 6, which of the following types of objects are used to store components in a container class? Answer is B, map object. Yeah. For other objects, other 3, A, C, D, so they have the same property. All these objects, they store, 1D data. Yeah. This map store 2D data. Yeah. So what is 1D data, 2D data? 1D array, 2D array, right? 1D array, so only you use one index to control all the elements. 2D arrays, you need to use a pair of indices, right, to control the elements in 2 dimensions. Yeah. Here, list set vector, so 1D type data, so you store, so you use one index variable to control all the elements in your data structure. But this map, basically you store key value pairs. All right. Key, the first dimension. Okay, first dimension. Yeah. Value, second dimension. Yeah. Why we use this type of data structure? The reason is very simple. This type of data structure, the main benefit using that, it supports search operation. Okay, yeah. Those 1D, they do not support search operations. So you can imagine easily, because for the 1D data, in order to access one particular, you have to start from the beginning, compare each data element, see if you get a match or not. Otherwise, you need to keep going until you compare all the data items in the data structure. So that's not efficient. So that's basically linear search. Linear search. Right. But for this 2D data structure, you can do much faster. Yeah. because you have a search key. Yeah. So given, when you start a search, given a search key, you have that key first. Because when you store the data, you provide a key for your data item. So given a search key, then you find the item. You find that item. Yeah. You do not use linear search. You do not use linear search. Yeah. So what kind of search do you use? Not binary search, not linear search. That search is a special type of search. So we call it key indexed search. Okay, so we have a key. We use key as index. Yeah, it's a special index. We know usually, typically, an index corresponds to a non-negative integer, right? Yeah. But here, our search key is a string. Yeah. A string can also be used as an index. Yeah. So we call it associative array. So using strings as indexes. Yeah. So here we call it key indexed search. So this kind of search much faster. Faster than linear search, faster than binary search. If we use our algorithm language to represent it, the search performance is big O of 1, constant 1. So that's the reason when you need to store components. Yeah. Whatever, so certain number of components. The best way always using map objects. Yeah. All right, so that's the background of question number 6. But here, since we use these special Java classes, so we call them collections. Collection type objects. Yeah. The reason very simple, because each object can hold certain number of other objects. Yeah. So it's a collection. So collection type. Yeah. Sometimes other people also call it container type. Container type. Yeah. Why container? So you can treat it as a container. So you can put in many different objects. But here I try to avoid it, right? So for this class, I try to avoid using the container terminology because we have our container concept for our technologies, Spring Container. So we don't want to get confused with another different container. Yeah. So here I try to avoid using container. So we just use the collection type. Yeah. So the next question, what is the right way to use the collection type objects? Yeah. So here, let me review Java generics. Yeah. I mentioned that before. If some of you who are still not familiar with this technology, here I give you a chance. So I review this technology a little bit. Yeah. Java generics, it was available since Java version 1.5. Yeah. After this version, then it was used. Yeah. 1.5 actually corresponds to the version 5. Yeah, that one can be dropped. So version 5. Okay. Yeah. So this technology solves one particular problem. Okay. So the goal, the idea, the goal convert runtime errors to compile time. Errors for collection type objects. So what's that? So let me explain. Yeah. All right, so before we use the Java generics. So what's the Java generics? Yeah. All right, so let me use one example. List object. This list is an interface. Yeah. So it is not a class. In order to create a list, we have to use a concrete class to do it. For example, my list, all right, equals constructor. There is no list constructor. We have to use some other concrete class that implements this interface as, you know, that class as the constructor. There is one called array list. All right, yeah, constructor. Right. After you create it, then you can add many different objects into this list object. So use this my list dot add. When you add an object, add object 1, object 2, and so on. But when you add to it, what's the object type of object 1, object 2? Yeah. It only requires the capital object type. We know this is the top object type. All other Java objects are subclasses of this top level object, right? Yeah. So when you add to this my list, you have no problem. But after you retrieve from the my list, okay? So how do you retrieve? So my list dot get index 0, so the first element, index 1, second, and so on. So you can retrieve object one by one. Then you have problem. The problem is the object you retrieve is of capital object format, but before you can use it as your original Java class object, you have to do the casting. Otherwise, you cannot use as your special business class. Yeah. So, for example, I do casting my bin. Okay. Yeah. I have to do casting my bin. Okay. Yeah. But that is for object 1. For object 1, I do my bin. But if my object 2 is not of this my bin 1, it is my another different class, my class, for example. I need to do a different casting. Now you have the trouble. How do you memorize what appropriate classes you should use to do the casting? Especially if you separate. So when you add into the collection object, that's in a different location. You add. Now, when you use it in another different location, how do you connect to the original place you add those objects? What are those types? So for a programmer, it is very hard. Okay? Yeah. Not very convenient. And you may get it wrong, right? So when you do the casting, you may do the wrong casting. when you do the wrong casting, just think about because you couldn't follow exactly, you may get confused by yourself. Okay, so when you do the wrong casting, compiler cannot detect it. Compiler cannot detect it. Detect the error. So you have no chance to fix it. Then at the runtime, you get runtime error. So your program breaks at the runtime because the object type format is different. It breaks. We know runtime errors always very hard to fix. You need to figure out the problem. Where is the location? For what reason it has the problem? It is very time consuming to fix a runtime error. Okay. Now, if you can avoid that situation, if you can make a compiler to catch those errors, then you can fix it immediately. You do not need to wait until at the runtime you get that runtime error. So the way to fix it, Java generics. The solution is very simple. When you create an object, you specify the object type using Java generics. Although this list can hold any general object, but you specify the object type, my bin, for example. Okay, so my list equals new array list arrow bracket my bin. All right, constructor that way. Okay, now the compiler knows for this collection object, only my bin type objects can be dropped into it. If someone drop into a wrong object, compiler knows it is wrong. So the compiler would complain. You can see the compiling error. Okay, so you can fix it immediately. Then when you retrieve, because for this one, when you retrieve, no casting operation, no casting needed. Because all objects must be in that my bin type. So the Java can do the conversion immediately for you. The Java knows how to do the conversion. You do not need to explicitly do the casting. So you can see that's the basic idea of Java generics. If you use this technology, so you can make your Java code with better quality, easier to maintain. Okay. All right. So let me stop this topic here. Later, so we have another question using Java generics. So at that time, so let me provide a little more information about Java generics. All right. So let me stop our second video here.